Green Lantern is one of those characters that are severely underappreciated. Green Lantern and his corner of the DC universe is a huge part of everything to do with DC. It's their Star Wars. It's a common comparison, I know, but it's true. Back in the early 2010s, there was a Green Lantern movie that was notoriously horrendous. Ryan Reynolds played Hal Jordan, and the movie bombed heavily. I've always been a huge fan of the character and his world. Everything about the power rings and their lore is incredibly fascinating to me, so I decided to write my version of James Gunn's DCU Green Lantern. For casting, I'd really like to see Michael B. Jordan take on the role of Jon Stewart. He has the ability to play angry, but also level-headed. He is able to hold the role of a soldier, yet also a kind-hearted man. And with all that being said, let's begin. The movie opens with some exposition to get out of the way for the rest of the movie. We see the Guardians, the leaders of the Green Lantern Corps. They make a peaceful exchange with the people of the planet Okara to keep the orange light buried in the planet, unreachable to any normal being. In order to do this, the Guardians and the people of Okara decide to keep the planet out of the Guardians' jurisdiction. They aren't allowed to interfere with anything that happens on this planet. After hundreds of years, the orange light is still buried in the planet, until one day, one creature decides that he wants the power for himself. His name is Larfleeze. He looks beastly, yet walks on two legs like a humanoid creature. Larfleeze managed to sneak his way into the government buildings on the planet and reach the orange light. When he found it, his greed overtook him. He killed everybody in the building with his bare hands, then took the orange light for himself. The light manifested in a ring, the Orange Power Ring. Larfleeze has given his suit and the ring, and using it, he killed every last creature on Okara. He destroyed all civilization on the planet, not wanting to share the ground with anybody else. His greed overtook him, and it caused him to commit genocide on an entire planet. Using his power ring, he created a new civilization, one made of caves and caverns in the ground, of the now barren desert that remains of the planet. Larfleeze dwells in the caves in order to protect his newfound power. The Guardians get word of this, and they talk of what's going on and what they're going to do. However, they all agree that there's nothing they can do. It's outside of their jurisdiction, as the deal had stated. They need to just leave it be, unless the orange light becomes a threat to their area of operation. They discuss how they need to make sure that every area is covered. As they go through the list of sectors they have covered, they find one that isn't. Sector 2814, Earth. The Guardians forge a new green power ring. They call on the ring to find whoever may possess the willpower to wield such a power, a tool of peace, a weapon of mass destruction. Cut to the title card, The Green Lantern. We cut to a man. This is Jon Stewart. He sits in the living room of an older home. He's in his mid-20s and he's sitting on the couch holding a bunch of bills. Just then, an older woman walks into the room. It's his mother. The two talk for a moment about the bills, showing that Mrs. Stewart is running late on her bills and Jon is having to help her pick up the slack. Jon is shown to be on the poor end of society. He lives in Detroit, Michigan, in the suburbs. Crime rates are high, and Jon has always wanted to move his mother out of Detroit, but he can't afford it. Jon is shown to be a good man. He has a big heart. His main source of income is handyman work in other people's houses. He isn't very good at it, fixing pipes and such, but it gets him just barely enough money to survive. His mother's retirement pension isn't all too much, so this is the best that he can do. She was never able to become the doctor she wanted to be, but she was an experienced nurse. Shortly after, Mrs. Stewart makes lunch. After this, they head into the city using a beater truck that Jon bought a few years back. When they get into the city, they attend a protest. It's a protest against the mayor and how black communities aren't getting the funding that they need in order to build better homes and businesses. The crowd is made up of mostly African Americans holding signs and chanting that they need more income. Even though this is a peaceful protest, there's still police officers holding back crowds that aren't even pushing back. Jon and his mother begin chanting along with the crowd, but shortly Jon notices something. A man in the front of the crowd gets pushed by a policeman in riot gear. The man shouts at him, and the policeman swings his baton at the man, knocking him beside the head. This causes the man to get violent. He tackles the policeman. A fight breaks out, and the police begin shooting violent civilians. Jon rushes in to help calm the situation, but he's shot in the process. The bullet isn't fatal, it just grazes his leg, but it does cause him to collapse. He's lucky it didn't hit him straight on. We then cut to Jon in the hospital. His mother is by his side, and Jon is getting some light stitches for the wound. Back at the home, Jon tells his mother that he's going to enlist in the Marines. When she questions him, Jon tells her that he needs to do something that matters, something that's important, and that can make a difference. Within the next couple months, John is enlisted and ready to be deployed at boot camp. When he gets there, we get a small montage of him succeeding at the vigorous segments of training, and with that, he's deployed onto the field. While on his first mission, he gets orders to liberate a village in the Middle East from a terrorist organization. John and the rest of his team succeed in ridding the village of its captors, but when one civilian is exposed as an undercover operative, John's team is nearly wiped out with a grenade. Less than half of the men make it out alive, but John manages to survive. With that, he gets orders from his leader to kill the entire village to make sure there aren't any enemies in the area. John looks upon innocent civilians in the streets and sees women and children, clearly innocent. John refuses and throws his weapon down into the dirt. John is dishonorably discharged and sent home for his disobeying of orders. When John returns home, he decides that he still wants to make a change, so he goes into construction. After a year on the job, John has made friends and is a valued member of the community. He works on building homes and safe places to eat for the less fortunate in the community. One day while at work, there's an incident. A worker falls into a hole that is being filled with concrete. Everybody's in shock and the man is fearing for his life. Everybody stands around not knowing what to do, but John quickly rushes into action. He tries to pull the worker out of the pit, but he can't do it alone. All of the other workers begin helping him, but it isn't working. The pit is filling too quickly, and the lever to stop the machine is broken. John continues to try, but doesn't succeed. He rushes over to the machine and tries to pull the lever. As he struggles, he sees something flying down towards him from the sky. It's a small green light that floats down onto his finger. It's the green power ring that the Guardians had sent. It slips onto John's finger, and the Green Lantern uniform covers his body. His eyes glow green, and John is suspended in the air. He's a quick learner, too. He thinks to himself he needs bigger hands to pull this, and, as if on cue, the massive green light constructs form around his fists, giving him all the strength he needs to pull the lever. However, he's a little too strong with it, and he rips the lever right off. John notices that the concrete is still pouring and the workers almost completely submerged. John flies up to the machine and creates a large green bomb. He thrusts it into the machine and creates a force field to cover himself and all other workers. The bomb explodes and the machine is stopped. John rushes down to the worker in peril and pulls him out. All the workers are shocked at what they're witnessing. John lands and they all admire his suit. John observes the green ring and it's just glowing. John's eyes glow an incredibly bright white, while John is thrown into the air and launched through the sky like an emerald rocket. John hurtles through space. He's freaking out, but also managing to keep his cool as much as he can. After a few minutes of space travel, John has landed on Oa in front of the Guardians. The Guardians tell John that he's been chosen to represent and protect Sector 2814 as part of the Green Lantern Corps. John is unbelievably confused, yet surprisingly calm considering the circumstances. He's on an alien planet surrounded by big blue-headed aliens, and as he looks around, he sees thousands and thousands of other creatures of all shapes and sizes flying through the air of this green futuristic city. We then see Tomar Ray fly down behind John. The Guardians tell John that Tomar Ray will begin training him to use the power ring. Through various training sequences, Tomar Ray explains to John and the rest of the things he needs to know about being a Green Lantern. It's a full-time position. To put it in Earth terms, he's essentially now part of the Space Police Force. John says he needs to take some time to process this, and Tomar Ray begins to bring John Stewart where he'll be staying while he's on Oa. It's a nice room, reminiscent of an apartment on Earth. John sits on the bed and he admires the futuristic green room. John takes a deep breath and lays down. He's tired, so he dozes off. Larfleeze's eyes shoot open. They're a fiery orange color. He stumbles to his feet and uses his lantern to illuminate the dark cave he's in. He crawls out of the cave, but is to adjust to the light of the dirty world above him. As he walks through the barren wasteland, he talks to himself. He's twitchy and sounds vile. His voice sounds like nails on a chalkboard as he mutters to himself about wanting more. He craves more. He needs it. As he talks about this, his ring glows more and more, feeding off of his greed. Eventually, Larfleeze realizes that he has all he can get on this planet. He needs more, though. He needs to expand. Larfleeze begins to go planet to planet, wiping out civilizations that aren't protected by the Green Lantern Corps. Word gets back to Oa. The Guardians call a meeting to discuss the topic. It's been a few weeks since John arrived there and began his training. The Guardians call upon the rest of the Corps to discuss. While the discussion takes place, this is where we meet countless other Lanterns, including Kilowog, Chip, Salak, 2-6, and Vaz. The Guardians tell the Lanterns about the situation with Larfleeze. John's confused. He didn't know that there were other colors of lanterns. Tomar Ray stands next to him. He explains the rest of the lantern spectrum. He tells John that orange is for avarice. The Guardians tell the other Lanterns that there's nothing that they can do about it until something happens within their jurisdiction. John's angered by this. He sees all the other lanterns just agree. No questions asked. John stands up and questions the Guardians. Everybody else is confused. Nobody's ever questioned the Guardians. Their say is final. John tells them that they can't just sit around and do nothing while people are getting killed. That isn't right. They need to help, no matter what. Within jurisdiction or not. They need to do the right thing with the power they all possess. Nobody sides with them, though. John begins screaming at the other lanterns. How can they just sit around knowing that people need them? How can they sleep at night, knowing that there are children dying, families being torn apart, mothers losing their babies, all because nobody has the courage to do what's right? After this speech, John is clearly a good leader. Other lanterns stand with him. The Guardians are perplexed. They aren't used to this. They usually just tell the lanterns what's happening. It's never a discussion, it's an order. The Guardians silence the crowd and they tell John to sit back down. They tell him that if he tries that again, he's done. John doesn't back down, though. Why should he be silenced for speaking out? Why should he be silenced for wanting to do the right thing and help those in need? The Guardians try to take his ring from him, and John launches himself into space to find Larfleeze himself. After a while, he finds the villain. He engages in a fight with Larfleeze, but he's clearly outmatched. Larfleeze may not be as skilled as a fighter as John, but Larfleeze is significantly more experienced when it comes to ring power and usage. John is beaten, and he's on the verge of death. Larfleeze pins John to the ground. He stands on top of the Green Lantern and conjures a large claw to hold him down. John tries to hold back the claw, having to use more strength than ever. His eyes glow the brightest white, and he fires a massive energy blast at Larfleeze. Larfleeze sees this coming, so he flips out of the way, and while it's in the air, he creates a long sword and plunges it straight into John's gut. John cries out in pain, and Larfleeze goes to finish off the kill, but John manages to fly off into the sky. Mrs. Stewart sits at the dining table, combing through articles. They're missing person reports. She scans through them with tears in her eyes as she finds one with John's picture and name. She hasn't seen him in weeks. As far as she knows, he left for work one morning and never came back. The construction site workers all say that he was glowing green and flew into the sky, but the police dismissed it as the workers just being a bunch of stuff. Just as Mrs. Stewart's about to break down into tears, she hears a crashing noise outside. She rushes outside and sees John lying on the beater truck, the front completely smashed in from John landing on it. She realizes that it's her son and rushes over to him. She brings him inside and notices that he's been stabbed. She's about to ask questions, but, she prioritizes stitching his wound. Thankfully, the wound didn't puncture any major organs or arteries, so John's gonna live. He just needs to recover. When John wakes up, she begins asking him about everything. He explains what's been going on over the past few weeks. She's shocked, and she notices that her son needs help. John isn't sure if he's able to defeat this guy or convince the other lanterns to help him. Mrs. Stewart is completely out of her element, but she tells him how strong he is, how determined he is to help others. She tells him that with the passion and love he has in his heart for other people, that hasn't gone anywhere. It just needs a kickstart. She tells John that he needs to go be the hero that all those people need. He's found his calling. He's found how he's able to help others. John and his mother hug one another, and John stands up, fighting through the pain. He walks outside and looks up into the sky. It's blue and crystal clear. He then looks to his ring and takes a deep breath in. John uses the ring to cauterize the wound. Once he's good, he smiles back at his mother, then shoots into space. John returns to Oa. When he gets back, it's in ruins. Larfleeze had attacked while he was gone. John finds Tomar Ray and asks what happened. Tomar Ray explains to John that Larfleeze had killed a bunch of lanterns and had stolen their power, causing him to be stronger. John asks how many survived, and Tomar Ray says, "Enough, but they went into hiding for the time being, until we can come up with a plan." John accepts this and heads off to find Larfleeze. Eventually, he finds the villain sitting on the chairs of the Guardians. He sits there holding dozens of dull green power rings. He cackles, thinking he's won. John lands in front of him. Larfleeze is shocked to see that John is still alive. The two talk for a bit about ideologies. John talks about using the ring to help others and spread gratitude and hope, while Larfleeze says that nobody else is worth it. The only thing that's worth a damn is yourself. The only thing worth protecting is your own possessions. At some point, everybody's just going to turn on one another for materialistic objects. Larfleeze argues that it's better to protect your own than care for others. John's unique, though. He has the ability to empathize with his opponent. He sees Larfleeze's side of the story. He understands where he comes from. Hell, if things had gone differently, he'd be just like Larfleeze. After all he's been through, he knows more than anyone else that you can only look out for number one. Nobody else is going to care about you like you care about yourself. Except John had a few important things that Larfleeze didn't. He had a mother, a community, a family, friendships. He sees what's worth protecting, and he sees why he needs to use his ring for good, for the good of everybody, rather than take it all for himself. Larfleeze is angered that John isn't siding with him, so he leaps at John, a massive blade conjured. John makes his shield to block the attack. This is where we get our final battle of the movie. John and Larfleeze fight with a mixture of hand-to-hand as well as ring usage, giving both sides advantages at certain points throughout the fight. When the fight's finished, John has Larfleeze on the ground. At this point, Larfleeze is a rabid animal. He's trying to bite and scratch at John, but the ex-soldier holds him down with a dagger at Larfleeze's throat. Larfleeze begins screeching at John to finish the job. However, John refuses. That'd make him just like Larfleeze. Instead, John uses the dagger to slice off Larfleeze's ring finger. Larfleeze is depowered. John then conjures a large hammer and smashes it against Larfleeze's head, knocking him unconscious. Tamar Ray and the rest of the Lanterns arrive. They take the ring and tell John that this will be locked up, hidden, where nobody can find it. They'll also be taking Larfleeze to a prison cell that he'll never be able to escape from. John watches as Larfleeze is taken away by Tamar Ray and Kilowog. John looks back to Oa and he sees Lanterns already rebuilding. John smiles through his sweat and blood. For the ending of the movie, we see John and the rest of the Lanterns visiting planets that were hurt in Larfleeze's wake. They reinstate jurisdiction in those sectors and assign Lanterns to protect them. They go through the planets, rebuilding what was lost in their absence, as any good hero would do. The final scene is John returning home. He visits his mother once more and gives her a hug. He tells her that he needs to go and protect those who need protection. As John flies into the air, he sees everybody he's helped on Earth cheering for him and applauding for him, thanking their new hero for his contributions. John's the people's hero. He's going to do whatever he can to make sure everybody feels safe and accepted for who they are. The movie ends with John hovering above Earth, admiring the beauty of the great blue planet. He smiles and the camera cuts to black. Thank you so much for watching. This video took me the longest to make out of anything I've ever done before. I know how important this character is to so many people, as well as myself. I need to make sure that Green Lantern isn't a forgotten character that people just dismiss as a bland character with no depth or intrigue. Green Lantern represents control over our own emotions and doing what's right. If you haven't already, subscribe and make sure to turn on post notifications for more movie pitches and other things to come. Been doing good with uploading weekly, so let's keep that going. Take care.